If you want to read all of their work on it, they wrote a book called Generations, came out in the 90s, and it goes all the way back to this. And it's like, I don't know, 600 pages.
For the real nerds in the room.
Yeah, you'd have to be a real. I qualify. I read it.
I have not. So I was talking about how they uh, push together the different, like how they come up with their different sociological definitions, and you can actually see that this is in Neil Howe's book, and this is a newer chart, I think, but he actually pulled together a bunch of different uh, sort of archetypes from different systems that are used to define generations, and they all kind of fit in this four. He calls it seasons, winter, spring, summer, fall, and that's his right here. But he has a bunch of different Spranger life type, Kretschmer temperament, Jungian function, right? He pulled from a lot of different people, and but the point here is to say these are not for marketers. These are not for people who are looking, to try and figure out how to sell you something. And we've shown, you guys have seen before the chart of the different, the amount of money that the different generations have. The
Yeah.
the Federal Reserve does not use the marketing generations. They don't. I don't think they use the Strauss-Howe model. I think they use I think it's actually in the notes. They use a fixed 20-year model, but the average marketing generation of 12 to 14 years doesn't come up in how the Federal Reserve does their work. So when you get to academics, you're going to use something a lot more like this than you are what the marketers use. And finally, I just want to read a little bit of this so that you guys kind of understand the cultural backdrop that we're going to be talking a bit. The chart here describes how the generations move, and I can't make it any bigger, sorry, because what the part I wanted was actually in the lower right here. A prophet generation grows up as increasingly indulged post-crisis children, comes of age as the defiant young crusaders during an awakening, cultivates principle as moralistic midlifers, and ages into the detached visionary elders presiding over the next crisis. So if we go back to the first slide, that would be your boomers. And he actually lists them, there's post-war children there, right? Boom. And you can see on this slide here, you can see the prophet, there they are, right? Shaman, priest, magician, intuitive feeling, religious in the Spranger life types, dogmatic. So those would be your boomers. So nomad, or what we call Gen X, grows up as an underprotected child during the awakening, comes of age as the alienated young adults of a post-awakening world, mellows into pragmatic midlife leaders during a crisis, and ages into tough post-crisis elders. A hero, so you know these guys as Xers, and he doesn't talk about it here, but Xers, I've probably noticed that they have a lot of nihilism to them. There's a reason for that. They're underprotected. They tend to view the world as it's always all going to fall apart, and they're midlife leaders during the crisis, so their world has always been getting worse for as long as they can remember. So why wouldn't you be nihilistic? And then so a hero generation. You guys probably know these guys as the term the greatest generation, the ones that quote unquote won World War II. So that's the hero archetype. A hero generation grows up as increasingly protected post-awakening children, comes of age as the team-working young achievers during a crisis, demonstrates hubris as confident midlifers, and ages into the engaged, powerful elders presiding over the next awakening. And that dynamic right there is really what we're going to be focusing on today, hero versus prophet. I will read the artist generation, but those are going to be your Zoomers and your silents, and they're not really relevant to the current culture we have today yet. They will be soon. The artist generation grows up as overprotected children during the crisis, comes of age as the sensitive young adults of a post-crisis world. So we haven't had the crisis yet, and they haven't come of age yet in the post-crisis world. Breaks free as indecisive. Go ahead.
No, finish that, and I got a question.
Okay. Breaks free as indecisive midlife leaders. Oh, hi, Joe Biden. During an awakening, and ages into empathic post-awakening elders. Go ahead, Nick.
So, in some ways, this seems like astrology.
Well, okay.
In other ways, it seems like a generalization.
It is a generalization, and
okay.
So one of its the major complaints against it is that it appears to be non-falsifiable, and at the time it was
like
written,
astrology,
right? And at the time it was written, that was the primary accusation against it. This was all written and designed in the 90s, and everyone kept saying, "Oh, well, if we make it to 2015, 2016." And nothing bad has happened, then we know these guys were wrong.
Well, that's true for the non-history types, but anybody who wants to look back in history, it proves that pretty well for 400 years.
Well, it's a generalization, but the generations. Now, depending on your vocational training, you're going to have traits from other generations. Like, the engineer mind in me, that's a little bit different than my cultural mind. But I can recognize both, and they're both present.
Well, Dad, you were talking to me once about how, and I think this is mentioned elsewhere in the book, I couldn't find the quote though, about how Neil Howe talks about how in every generation there's kind of the leaders, the followers, and the rebels.
Yeah, he talks about that. But one of the things he stresses even more importantly on this note is the leaders are really important, but he also stresses this is a cultural average. Any individual may be exactly that, a leader, a true believer in it, or a rebel in it. So I've always been the skeptic watching my boomer. They're my elders because I'm a tail end boomer at best, and so I've always watched them. Thought their ideas were foolish, and that's my perspective, sitting at the bottom end of it. But the top end of those folks were, man, they were going to change the world, and so they fit that prophet profile most perfectly.
And another thing I would say is I mean, he does trace this back, and Generations is a tome. It's a hard read. And if you are willing to go back and look at the history, you can see what they're trying to say. But I think we've gotten, one of the interesting side notes, particularly about the Xer generation, is that they're allergic to generalizations.
What, more like that my truth is my thing?
Right. You can't generalize about me because I am a unique snowflake.
Sure.
So,
yes, but actually a conversation we had recently about their rejection of history fits into that too.
Ah, yes. We did have that conversation recently.
Another factor in us young boomers. I'm a young boomer. This big glut of people were right before me. So I come and I'm at the tail end. Well, you know what? All the good jobs, the managerial jobs, there was this glut of people, right? Just, a few years older than me, 5, 10, 15 years older. They held all the good positions. So I had to be in waiting for a long time before I got to the stage where I was actually respected and maybe got to experience some of that power. It's not that we're all looking for power, but you know what? Being a tail end boomer or being right after the boomers was not a great place to be when I was a young man.
The
So, so
millennials feel that only more.
and so, Steve,
Yeah.
what you're actually describing there is one of the sources of that Gen X nihilism.
I
Sure. Yeah.